Hello everyone and welcome to another Examiner Tips video where I show you how to get A stars in your essays for A-level economics. My name's Swithun Dobson and I have been an examiner for a number of years now, and I'm going to use my insights from examining to help improve your essays. So, what essay are we looking at today? Well, this is a past paper essay question from Edexcel. Global oil prices fell from a 2008 peak of $147 a barrel to $27 a barrel in 2016. Evaluate the likely macroeconomic consequences of a significant fall in global oil prices. This is for Edexcel, but the principles I'm going to show you here will be applicable to all the major examples, so don't worry about that. So, we've got this question, but then what is the question behind the question? What are they really wanting us to write about? Well, here it says the macro effects, so really what they're talking about here is growth, inflation, unemployment, and the current account. That's what they're getting us to talk about, really. Crucial question here is timing. Many tutees have a problem that they don't really write enough that they need to in the time. So we really need to have an idea of how long to spend on it. Edexcel paper is 120 minutes. There's 100 marks in the paper. There's 1.2 minutes a mark. And the essays are 25 marks, which then gives us 30 minutes for the essay. If you have extra time or whatever, 25%, that takes you up to 1.5 minutes a mark. But having a good idea of this helps you to practice in time so that you can replicate that in the exam. It's all well and good being able to do great essays where you spend hours on them for your teachers at school, but then you're not going to be able to replicate that in the exam. So timing is crucial and practicing that way is. So this time we're going to go for a 4-paragraph essay structure. We don't always do this, depends on the essay. The principles are the same though. So we're going to intro, effects on an oil exporting country, effects on an oil importing country, and conclude. In this case, it says what's the macro effects of a fall in oil price. I thought it would be interesting to look at 2 different types of country, one which is just imports oil and one just exports it, because the effects will be different. And then this helps us to evaluate, what do we think the overall effect will be. So being able to split the question like this is going to be helpful. So what should we do in our intro? Just define the macro objectives. So we want, sometimes say stable growth. I would tend to say high and stable growth. Low unemployment. This is a picture from the Jarrow Crusade, March of the Unemployed in the 1930s from the northeast of England. 2% inflation plus or minus 1% on the CPI is the standard measure the Bank of England has. So that's inflation. This is the good old hyperinflation from Zimbabwe when they got up to $100 billion notes. And then we've got the current account, which is isn't just exports and imports, but largely is. It's including primary and secondary income as well. So just define the terms so everyone knows what we're talking about, and then we can go into the essay proper. So, what are going to be the effects on an oil exporting country? Oil has few substitutes. Why does oil have few substitutes? Because when it comes to mainly transportation, at least at the moment, it's basically the only way you get around. You use oil-based devices. There are some electric ones, but for transport at the moment and using machinery on building sites, etc., oil is what you've got. And so you either use oil or you don't, in the form of whatever it uses, kerosene, diesel, or petrol. So you either use it or you don't use anything to a large extent. So oil really has relatively few substitutes. Consequently, because there's a few substitutes, you're going to have an inelastic PED, because you either buy it or you don't, effectively. And so if you have a decreased price, we're going to have a decreased total revenue. Why is that? If it's inelastic and the price goes down by 10%, quantity demanded will only go up by, let's say, 5%, which means that the increase in quantity will not compensate for the fall in price, and so the total expenditure on the oil will go down. Consequently, the value of exports in the oil exporting country will go down, which then obviously is going to mean that their current account is going to be less positive or more negative depending on what the country is. Consequently, because exports are a part of aggregate demand is going to fall, then it could cause deflation, we could get output falling. So we have what we have here, we have AD going down, so it's below capacity, and so we're in a recession essentially, and you see the price goes down, which of course is deflation. Labour is in derived demand. The only reason you have labour is because they produce this for you. You don't just employ workers for the sake of employing them, irrespective of what they do. You only demand them because they produce things that you can sell. And if you're selling fewer things, you demand less labour. This is then going to increase cyclical unemployment. It's probably going to mean a higher budget deficit because you've got to pay. You might pay welfare payments, or your tax revenues go down because the income tax revenues will be lower. So then you might have to put higher taxes on anyway, and so we're going to get a reduced standard of living. So places like, this is Saudi Arabia, are going to be, the citizens of Saudi Arabia are going to have worse standard of living as a result of this. So effectively, the effects on an oil exporting country are pretty much entirely bad. Well, not entirely, but pretty much. So, what's the effect on an oil importer, the country that gets oil into the country and uses it? Well, oil, as we've mentioned before, is a major source of energy. Any production process is going to have oil at some point of the supply chain. So, a reduction in oil price is going to reduce the cost of production. If you reduce the cost of production, the short-run aggregate supply curve will shift rightwards because we can now produce the same amount of output for a lower cost, and so we're going to get short-run economic growth. We could also make the claim that firms could have higher profits because they've got lower costs, and so if they have lower costs and have higher profits, they could spend more on research and development, which then could get better technology, which then will increase productivity, which then of course will then shift the long-run aggregate supply curve to the right, because effectively the quality of the factors of production is improved. If you treat the long-run aggregate supply curve as the quantity and quality of the factors of production, technology improves, as it were, the quality of them, and therefore we're going to see long-run growth. Related point as well here, we could say, because the costs of production have gone down, exports could become more competitive in price because you can put the price down and maintain the profit margins, which is then going to increase exports and then decrease cyclical and structural unemployment because aggregate demand increases. As to what the effect would be on the price level isn't obvious. So what we've got here, we can see that the short-run aggregate supply curve has shifted rightwards. If you look at the original equilibrium output Y, we can see that SRAS1, the cost of production is low. But the new equilibrium is a high level of real national output and a lower price level. However, if we also have an increase in exports, AD will increase from AD to AD1. So yes, we can see that we have a significant increase in output at Y2, but there's, the way I've drawn it, no change on the price. Now, what would happen to the price would depend on the magnitude of the shift of SRAS1 and SRA and AD. But it's not obvious what would happen to the price level. In addition, as well, this is related to what I just said, another reason why AD would increase, not just because exports go up, but because a fall in the oil price means that you're going to spend less on it for the same reason that people are going to spend on it less for the oil exporter because of the inelastic PED. The fall in price is going to mean that we're going to spend less on it as an importer, which means that we're going to have less import spending, which is less negative for AD, and then there's going to increase AD. So we've got less spending on imports, more exports, increasing AD, but then the cost of production go down. So the effect on inflation is going to be unclear to a large extent. That said, of course, we would expect that the current account would be less negative or more positive as a result. We could also make an argument that the standard of living would be higher, because real incomes would be higher. So, how do we go about concluding this? First thing we can obviously say, it depends whether you're a net importer or exporter. It's going to depend on the magnitude of how much of a net importer or a net exporter you are, is going to determine how much of an impact it's going to have on you. And also, of course, the duration of the oil price fall. If it's a short run affair, then it's not going to make that much difference in the long run to things like R&D expenditure, etc., etc., because it's only a short run change. But if you've listened to any of my videos before, this isn't the perfect type of conclusion we want. We want to make a definite judgment as to whether we think it's kind of good or bad, or what we think that the effects will be, rather than, oh, it depends on this, it depends on that. So I was going to make the argument that, you know, duration is probably going to be short, even though it fell significantly. Oil is still number one energy source, because, you know, you're using machinery for mining and other things. You're using oil-based ones. Battery technology isn't good enough at present to be able to reasonably compete with it. So oil, the demand for it is likely to be remaining high. And also, to my knowledge, you could say this is an assertion, but I'm not aware of any major improvements in extraction, which would explain why you would have a significant increase in supply over a long time period. So we would expect demand to remain high and extraction to remain broadly where it was, which you think that, well, you've got at least some reason to expect that the price should remain relatively high, and that, you know, we have this dip, it will go back up. Consequently, yeah, we'll get a short run gain for importer and short run losses for exporters, but in the long run it's not going to make much difference, so you might not have much effect on structural unemployment. One of the things for the oil importer, you could have said, is oil being cheaper may have made it more cost effective for heavy industry to work, which uses oil, or medium industry, or light industry is the right term. And so, you know, those sort of blue collar jobs could remain, but if it's in the short run, it's not going to make that much difference to it, to prevent the increase of the structural unemployment. And that's kind of the standard narrative, that, you know, the West is becoming more service based and less industrial. Also, what we can make, and this is, we can link it to the UK, and in most cases that's what we want to do, is the UK exports services primarily, and so the fact that oil is cheaper, you make some difference to the cost of the exports, but it's not like you're exporting machinery or steel or other things like that, which would have a direct cost of a high direct cost related to oil and other things like that. So if the energy prices went down, then for exports to, say, financial services, it would make some difference, but it's not going to make a huge difference, not in the same way it would make a difference for say a construction firm or something like that. So yeah, we'll probably get some short run increase in exports as it become more price competitive, but it's not going to be very much. And again, this is the type of conclusion we want to be drawing, making a reasoned judgment. Also, we can relate any of our conclusions to the current data that we have. So yeah, we could get a small increase in exports, but we could get a relatively larger fall in domestic prices, which you could say either at least is going to mean we're not going to hit the Bank of England 2% target, or potentially could get us to deflation. Now, this is the latest inflation stats that I could get, last measured at 0.5%. So we could say that actually, if we wanted to achieve the Bank of England target of 2%, that a fall in prices, a fall in costs, might actually tip us, well, at least going to get us further away from 2%, which you then could consider bad, or even it could get you to go to a moderate, well, very minor deflation, as you can see we had in 2015-16. And so this is, again, using your contemporary knowledge helps you produce reasoned judgment by using that data. Other classics for that are the unemployment rate and the interest rate as set by the Bank of England. So that's pretty much the essay as such. So one of my top tips again. So as ever, build chains of reasoning. Don't just say, oh, we've got a fall in cost of production because the oil price has gone down. Oh, therefore we'll have deflation in general. Well, that doesn't follow. It's kind of like the opposite to cost push inflation. When you're talking about cost push inflation, don't just say, oh yes, one cost of production has gone up. Let's say mercury, the thing they used to have in thermometers. If that goes up in price, is that really going to cause prices in general to go up? Well, no, because it's not used in that many production processes. However, oil is used pretty much everywhere, and that might then give us extra reason to suspect that the prices everywhere might go down. So we really want to explain all the individual parts of our explanation, because the examiner's going to be looking at it and going, oh yes, this is good analysis marks, this is going to get us into the top brackets, for at least for analysis. Use examples. It's useful if you broad knowledge. What is oil used for? Why is oil going to have few substitutes? Well, having some knowledge of how the world operates and what they use oil for will help you in giving you just reason for saying why it might have a high PED or a low one. Again, helps to detail your analysis. You're going to improve your writing overall. And as I did in the conclusions, we need to make reasoned judgments. We're not just repeating, say, on the one hand this and the one hand that. We're explaining why we think it is likely that this is going to take place. For what we said before, we don't think it's going to make much of a difference because we expect the oil price to probably rebound, it probably remain the same for the reasons I explained before. And not just say, oh, well, it depends if you're an importer or an exporter, because that doesn't really answer the question. Now, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. If you have enjoyed this, please subscribe or comment below. The more subscribers I get, the higher I get in the search rankings, and the more people can benefit from this work. And if any of you would like any personalised tuition from me, please check out my website at www.rougemont-tutoring.co.uk, or just directly email me at swithun@rougemont-tutoring.co.uk. That's swithun@rougemont-tutoring.co.uk. Thank you.